करो करो क्लिक में।
So far we've discussed the poems and the novel in the course. This is the last unit, and we'll be covering the short stories in the course. There are 3 short stories, one by Salman Rushdie, The Free Radio, and then there's The Intrusion by Shashi Deshpande, and then the last one is Manjula Padmanabhan's Stains.
हाँ जी मैम। Yes.
Please mute yourself.
उनको बोल दो ना एसपल की रेस्ट। चलो मैं बोल देता हूँ। तो बोल देता हूँ एसपल की उसी पे लगा हुआ है ना यूट्यूब चैनल जो वेबसाइट पे।
सर म्यूट कर लो ना।
मैं बोलता हूँ, मैं भेजता हूँ मैं।
Okay, I've let everyone in. We are starting with the short stories. Okay, we'll first start with Salman Rushdie's The Free Radio. I hope all of you can see this. Yes, okay, done. Let's move ahead.
मैम आप शेयर कर सकते हैं आप। हम स्टार्ट कर दीजिए।
Hello?
यस मैम माइक म्यूट था आपका, अब आप स्टार्ट कर दीजिए मैम।
ठीक है, sir. So today we are going to cover 3 short stories. Okay. First one is Salman Rushdie's Free Radio. Second one is Shashi Deshpande's The Intrusion. And the third is Manjula Padmanabhan's Stains. Okay. So we'll quickly start with Rushdie. I hope you can see this. This is one of the quotes from Rushdie's interviews where he says, "We all live in stories, so called grand narratives." What does he mean by this? He means that everything around us is a story, right, which is constructed by others and which we need to question, right, and we need to argue about it, And this argument itself is freedom. What he means by this is that society feeds us certain stories that are related to religion, that are related to maybe caste, gender, right, class, identity, everything. And society sells these stories as something which are intact and which need to be followed. But Rushdie says you need to question those things and you just can't follow them blindly, right? Because if you won't question them, you won't grow, it won't change. For example, earlier child marriages used to happen, or sati practice was very much active. But when these practices were questioned and the hostility of it towards women was questioned, the practice was abolished, change came in, child marriages were abolished, right? So that is how societies grow. And Rushdie himself, writes very provocative works. And if you've heard about it, he wrote a novel called The Satanic Verses, which was against Islam in some ways, and a fatwa was issued in his name that if he's found publicly, he would be assassinated or stabbed. And recently, I guess in 2021, he was at an event and he had a new book out, and he was there and he was stabbed there by a knife. So Rushdie is someone who questions things and authorities a lot. He questions politics a lot. I am talking about The Free Radio by Salman Rushdie. Okay? And he also says there is this article by a Western critic and author George Orwell. I hope you've heard about it. इनका article है Inside the Whale, right? He's writing in the context of the Second World War. एंड ऑरवेल कहता है कि कभी कभी चीजें अवॉइड करने के लिए हमें उनसे दूर हो जाना चाहिए एंड द ऑर्डिनरी मैन शुड बिकम पैसिव. ठीक है, ही शुड नॉट एंगेज विद दोज थिंग्स. बट रशदी इन वन ऑफ हिज आर्टिकल्स कॉल्ड आउटसाइड द वेल, वो उसमें ये कहता है कि पॉलिटिक्स और लिटरेचर जो हैं वो मिक्स्ड हैं एंड दे आर कनेक्टेड, राइट, एंड दे डू नॉट एग्जिस्ट इन वैक्यूम, राइट. इसका मतलब क्या था कि जो भी पॉलिटिक्स में चल रहा है, जो भी स्पोर्ट्स में चल रहा है, जो भी सोसाइटी में चल रहा है, उसका इन्फ्लुएंस लिटरेचर पे आएगा. और कहीं ना कहीं लिटरेचर भी हमें इन्फ्लुएंस करेगा, right, to follow certain things, to believe in certain things, right. For example, we become what we read. So if you're reading something that is very unacceptable for the society, right, and if you practice that thing, then you will be shunned from the society. So that is what Rushdie means, ki politics and literature are connected and we cannot look at them in vacuum, right, and we cannot move ourselves away from this. क्योंकि रशदी का मतलब ये था कि अगर जो चीजें सोसाइटी में हो रही है आप उसके अगेंस्ट कुछ नहीं बोलोगे तो दैट विल ओनली बेनिफिट द स्टेटस को, दैट विल ओनली बेनिफिट द पीपल हु आर एट द टॉप, and the middle class people, the ordinary man will always suffer, right. And he said there is no easy escape from history, from the fuss that is around us, right. We have to engage in it and we'll always be a part of it. ठीक है. तो अब इस स्टोरी में क्या हो रहा है, देयर आर थ्री फोर कैरेक्टर्स इन द स्टोरी. देयर इज दिस रिक्शा पुलर रमानी, राइट, who falls in love with a widow who's a thief's widow and who has children, and so that they could get married he undergoes sterilization. I think आप सबको पता होगा during the period of emergency Congress government enforced sterilization where men were being sterilized because there was a tremendous growth in the population and the resources were not enough with the government to feed all the people. And men were running away from sterilization a lot because they believed that it will hamper their sexual forces or sexual energy, right. So when this was happening, the government said that the men who will get sterilized, they will get a free radio. And when Ramani gets sterilized, he waits in the hope that he will get that free radio. Right. This can symbolize that the government makes promises, it makes policies, it says that it will benefit us and it will help us, but those promises are just delusions, they are just fake and they're never fulfilled. Just like Ramani never gets the free radio, the ordinary man will never be benefited from the policies that the government creates. And Ramani also moves to Mumbai because other people tell him that he can become a really great actor, and he leaves his life and he takes his wife and children and goes there, and he, sends these letters back to his village that I met this famous celebrity. Yeah, I did this, I did that. I'm enjoying Mumbai, and the letters itself are too perfect to be true. So there as well, he is living in his delusions that one day he will become successful, he'll become a famous actor, but that is not true. So Ramani is a character who's quite delusional, right? He does not understand politics. He's very young, he's very hopeful, and he lives in his dreams, right? First, he hopes that he will get the radio, then he hopes that he'll be a successful actor, but he does not achieve these dreams. But he imagines that he does it because otherwise the reality was too harsh for him to accept, right? On the other hand, there's the schoolmaster who is the narrator as well. अब usually जो omniscient narrators होते हैं, they know everything about what is happening in the story, and उनका जो viewpoint होता है वो बहुत ज्यादा objective होता है, right? God like perspective होता है. But यहाँ पे जो हमारा narrator है, he is not at all omniscient. He does not know everything, right? He's not objective. Rather than he's very subjective, he's very emotional, and we can often see him commenting on the status of the society, commenting on Ramani, commenting on the thief's widow, right? And he gives his perspective about the government as well, but he says that I am not saying these things, these are the things that the villagers are gossiping about, right? And he quotes his resources as the village gossips. So he's not a very not a very authentic person to believe in when it comes to opinions, but his and Ramani's characters and thinkings are very much opposite, right? They're very contrasting because the schoolmaster is very much realistic, and he knows that the government would not fulfill the promises that it made. The government will not, help the ordinary man, and he knows that Ramani is being used by the thief widows to feed her children, and she does not love her, and she only married her so that she could have a house, shelter, and some income, right? And he's very emotional. His reactions are very aggressive sometimes, and he cares about Ramani. Sometimes he's very angry, sometimes he's very irritated at Ramani, and why can't he just understand what things are happening, right? And of course, he's an old man, so his thinking is very much traditional, and he believes that the thief's widow is using her body, her sexuality to attract Ramani, and she's not a woman of good character, right? Just because she's a thief's widow. And of course, the widow, we don't know the name of the widow throughout the story. She's again and again referred to as the thief's widow. Again, the woman has no identity. She's defined through her husband. She's defined to her husband's profession, thief, right? And she's also trying to steal Ramani's sexuality by getting him sterilized. She's also trying to steal his money, his life, by getting married and burdening him with her children, right? And in return, Ramani has to work hard a lot, and he's not. He hopes to become successful, but he cannot because of all the responsibilities that he has in his, over him. And the possible questions that can be asked from this story are significance of the title. So the title is the free radio, and अभी मैंने बताया आपको कि why is Rushdie writing like this, and when you read the story, he clearly mentions the time of the emergency and what the government policies were. So the title can be important when we talk about how the oppressive behavior of government works, and how they exploit the poor, right? And they compensate people for the humiliation kya hai yahan pe, the sterilization, right? And the free radio is a symbol of achievement and of loss for Ramani. Achievement kaise? Since he got sterilized, he got the radio and he got the thief's widow as his wife, right? So he married the woman he loved. And loss, of course, loss of his masculinity in a way because he got sterilized, he cannot produce children anymore. And Secondly, he also lost his freedom, his agency, because now the widow will control his life, and he'll have to take care of his family, and he cannot, follow his dreams and passions, right? And the free radio has guilt and happiness attached to it. Guilt of getting sterilized, of believing in the government, of believing in the government's policies, right? And happiness that someday these things will get fulfilled. The government will make its promises, it will send a free radio, right? And that Ramani did not lose something, instead he gained something. ठीक है, significance of the title समझ में आ गई? Then the character of the schoolmaster, as I told you, he's very emotional, he's very subjective, he's the narrator, right? And his thinking is very traditional and very old school. He believes that Ramani is a very innocent guy and he cannot see reality the way it is, right? And the narrator is not at all reliable. Unreliable narrator है. Unreliable क्यों है? Because his story is totally from his perspective and he does not brings in the perspective of other people. ठीक है? And Ramani ka bhi, I told you, he's a very delusional person. He lives in his dreams. He does not know the reality. He believes what anyone tells him, right? And he does not choose himself. Believes in the government. He believes in the thief's widow, and he believes that he will become a movie actor. But ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है, right? And he has a lot of faith in the world, and he thinks that world is a nice place, but the reality is something else. Okay? And the thief's widow is presented in a very bad and negative light by the narrator, by the schoolmaster. She's seen as someone who, seduces Ramani to get married to her, and she forces him to move, she forces him to get sterilized. She's shown as a very selfish person who only looks after herself and her family. But if we look at things, what else would she have done? Right? At that point of time, when the story is written during the time of the emergency, women couldn't work, okay? And since she is a widow, so वैसे ही she was always at threat of other men seducing her, of other men trying to, have sexual favors with her. And since she was a thief's widow, she would not have any money, and she had children to take care of. So she had to find a reliable partner who would fulfill her needs, right? उसके बिना तो फिर वो कैसे रहती? How would she have lived? हाँ, ठीक है. उसके बाद द कंसेप्ट ऑफ नेशन एंड गवर्नमेंट, एज आई टोल्ड यू कि क्या चल रहा है. पॉलिसीज बनती हैं बट दे आर नेवर फुलफिल्ड, and the government makes promises which it never acts upon, and the people keep suffering. They keep expecting that a change will come, people will help them, things will grow, but nothing like that happens. ठीक है? I hope you're done with this story. Pushed out. Chalo, let's move on to the next story then. The next story that we are going to discuss is Shashi Deshpande's The Intrusion. एंड एक बार यार फिर से टाइटल हर स्टोरी का, हर पोएम का प्रिपेयर कर लेना. दे कैन आस्क यू क्वेश्चंस अबाउट हाउ द टाइटल इज रेलिवेंट, या व्हाट डज द ऑथर मीन बाय दिस टाइटल और दैट. गवर्नमेंट पॉलिसी वाला कंसेप्ट बस यही है कि गवर्नमेंट इंट्रोड्यूसेस पॉलिसीज, ठीक है. जैसे उन्होंने बोला कि अगर आप स्टेरिलाइजेशन करवाओगे तो हम आपको फ्री रेडियो देंगे. बट ये जो प्रोमिसेस गवर्नमेंट करती है ये वो कभी भी फुलफिल नहीं करती है, राइट? जैसे रमानी ने स्टेरिलाइजेशन करा ली बिकॉज गवर्नमेंट ने कहा था, बट उसको कभी रेडियो नहीं मिला, राइट? तो गवर्नमेंट ने फेक प्रोमिसेस करे. हम गवर्नमेंट में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, हम गवर्नमेंट में बिलीव करते हैं कि हम नेशन की हेल्प कर रहे हैं. The government is working in our favor, the government is helping the ordinary man, but ऐसा कुछ नहीं हो रहा है. गवर्नमेंट फेक और शैलो प्रोमिसेस करती है. उन्हें ऑर्डिनरी मैन से फर्क नहीं पड़ता, उन्हें सिर्फ अपने बेनिफिट और अपने आप से फर्क पड़ता है. When you read the story, तो आपको उसमें बहुत सारे एग्जाम्पल्स मिल जाएंगे इस चीज के. ठीक है? हाँ, now let's स्टेरिलाइजेशन. ओके, जब आई थिंक 1970s की बात है ये, व्हेन इंडिया में इमरजेंसी वाज अप्लाइड, राइट? बिफोर दैट Men were sterilized in such a way. Sterilization means that men cannot conceive a baby and they cannot release the gametes which are needed to reproduce. So when they are sterilized, they become incapable of reproduction. They can still indulge in sexual activities, but they cannot reproduce a child. Sterilization is done to control the population. इंडिया में स्टेरिलाइजेशन हुई थी इमरजेंसी के टाइम पे, राइट? अगर आप लोगों ने वो मूवी देखी हो सांड की आंख, उसमें देयर इज दिस सीन वेयर द मेन आर रनिंग अवे फ्रॉम द गवर्नमेंट पीपल एंड दे डोंट वांट टू गेट स्टेरिलाइज्ड. समझ में आ गया? ओके, लेट्स मूव अहेड. अब शशि देश पांडे की स्टोरी है, इसका नाम है द इंट्रूजन. So Deshpande is of course she's a women author and she says कि मुझे सिर्फ women author क्यों कहा जाता है? I write about life, right? I write about humanity. I write about humans, and I do not want to be called a women author, a women writer, because I am just narrating things that are happening in the society, right? And she says, yes, I do write about women, and they come from my own suppressed feelings of being a woman in a society, right? Where I am defined through the roles of mother, daughter, daughter in law, wife, all the roles that I play in the society. But no one pays attention to what I am or who I am. And most of the times, women have to suppress their feelings in the society, to be so that their families can. Function really well, and they have to isolate themselves sometimes. No one cares about what they feel or what they want. And she's telling about this is something that happened me as well, but I'm writing about a human being and the idea that the society has about of me as a woman, right? And इसीलिए मेरी writing को women's writing कहा जाता है, but this is not that. I'm writing about humans. And she says कि women are often seen as what not a man is. ठीक है? इसका मतलब कि मेरी writing को या women's writing को usually ऐसे ही देखा जाता है something where what only women would read, right? And since it is a patriarchal world, women is seen as a lack, as something she lacks. Like she's not a man. Her mind is not a man's mind. Her writing is not a man's writing, right? So she said कि ये distinction क्यों है? We should only see the writings of any author as just writings, and we should not bring in gender at that point of time. ठीक है? देश पांडे की स्टोरीज में मेजरली जो नैरेटर होता है वो फर्स्ट पर्सन होता है, ठीक है? देयर इज अ वुमन who's talking about her experiences, her situation, her conditions, ठीक है? And she, when you read her stories, you can feel that especially girls and women can feel very much connected, very much closer, because again, she's narrating women's experiences from a women's point of view. So we all can relate to it somewhere, right? Her stories are mostly women centered, right? And women are in the traditional Indian roles. Either they are a wife, they are a daughter, or they are a mother, right? And they are in a tradition bound male oriented society where they have to fulfill the roles assigned to them, right? And they are always lonely, and they have a sense of guilt and failure around them. They are always surrounded by people, but it never felt included, and they always have to just fulfill their role, and no one cares about what they want, right? And Deshpande says कि I'm not a feminist writer and I don't want to, change the conditions of anyone. I am just portraying social reality the way it is, right? And I don't want to claim or say what it ought to be. मतलब she says कि मेरे को change नहीं लाना है अपनी writing के through society में, ना मुझे ये सिखाना है लोगों को कि society कैसी होनी चाहिए. बस मैं उनको ये बता रही हूँ कि society कैसी है, right? The way society is. अब when you read this story and if you've read this story, you will see that बहुत common सी चीज के बारे में उसने बात करी है, that is marital rape. राइट? आधे लोगों को तो मैरिटल रेप पता ही नहीं होता क्या होता है, right? Because people believe that once a woman is married, she has, the husband has the right to do anything with her, and her consent is no longer applicable, right? Because she decided to get married to that person. So this story is about marital rape, right? And most people won't see anything wrong with this because they are like, हाँ तो वो उसका husband है, उसको right है वो कुछ भी करे. But the woman in the story, she feels isolated throughout, and she says to her husband ki, I don't even know you, we are not even friends, we are just like strangers, and how can I come close to you physically when I don't know you emotionally or mentally, and let's become friends first, let's get to know each other. But the husband says, how will I get to know you if you are, so away from me, and if you won't allow me to touch you? तो यहाँ पे women और men का idea बहुत different है, right? Of what a bond is, or what about what a marriage is, right? The man wants to comes sorry. The man physically wants to come closer to her while she emotionally and mentally wants to connect to her, right? To him. तो लड़कों का पहला स्टेप है या लड़के का पहला स्टेप है इस मैरिज में to physically come closer to her, and she on the other hand wants to build a bond first, right? And she is not at all comfortable around him, and she tries to avoid his touch. She tries to move away from him, and he on the other hand just wants to touch her and get into bed with her, right? And देश पांडे की mostly stories में यही होगा, जो female characters हैं, they are isolated and frustrated, right? Because they are not getting what they want, they have to sacrifice a lot, and this makes them frustrated. And but they do not say anything because they don't want to hamper the family and its unity, right? अब इस story में भी जो हमारी author है, after her husband forces her to, get intimate with him, she says ki, I will keep quiet, I don't want to say anything because then his family and my family won't be happy and they won't like it, and of course he's my husband, तो ये कभी ना कभी तो होना ही था, right? So she, even though she's not feeling good, she feels harmed, she feels scared in a way, right? She feels that her personal space was violated. She still does not say anything, she'll keep quiet because the family or the respect of the family is much more important than her individual condition and situations, right? Living up to the ideals is of course far more important than her personal rights. She has to be an ideal wife, an ideal daughter-in-law, an ideal mother, right? And her personal desires and wishes are of no importance as such, right? एंड ऑफ कोर्स अगर एक डिवोटेड वाइफ है तो उसका क्या काम है कि वो अपने हस्बैंड की सेवा करे, उनकी सारी बातें माने, राइट? एंड she has to do anything and everything he says, regardless of whatever she is feeling, whatever she is going through, right? And even though she communicates very clearly to her husband that I'm not comfortable, he still does not pay any heed to her. Okay? And even though she is with her husband, when you'll read the story, you'll see there are a lot of passages where she's enjoying the breeze alone. There is a lot of talk about how she can hear the sea and the waves and the sounds of waves, rushing towards the beach. And she's focusing on that a lot. And she wants to be like that. She wants to be free. She wants to do whatever she wants. But after her husband gets intimate with her forcefully, she does not hear the sound of the sea, right? Because she has lost that agency, she has lost the independence, the freedom to articulate her feelings, right? And she, even though she is with her husband alone, but still she is very much alienated in a private world. A lot of thoughts are going on in her mind which she cannot say out loud to her husband for the fear of getting hurt, or for the fear of, making him angry or uncomfortable. But no one cares about her discomfort, right? And as I told you, Deshpande does not suggest any solutions. She just acts like a camera and she records whatever is going on. Okay? And Shashi Deshpande wrote this story to shatter the myth that women find fulfillment in marriage. ऐसे बोला जाता है ना एक लड़की को कि get married and you will be happier, you will be fulfilled, and you will get what you want from life. But this does not happen because the protagonist is very much frustrated. She is at unease. She feels alone. She misses her mother a lot. You know, in the story, she talks about how before getting married, she used to, have fights with her mother or have arguments with her mother. But now she would do anything to get back to her mother because there she felt safe, seen, and heard. Right? And she, of course, submits to whatever husband wants, right? And she becomes helpless in this and she suffers from despair, right? And जो हमारा टाइटल है इंट्रूजन का मतलब क्या होता है कि आप किसी की लाइफ में उनकी परमिशन के बिना एंटर कर रहे हो, इंट्रूड कर रहे हो, राइट? सो the protagonist sees whatever her husband did as an intrusion into her privacy, the violation of her right to herself. कि मेरे से बिना पूछे he touched me, he did things with me, and he intruded into my privacy, thinking of it as a right, you know. Abhi 1 year ago, this movie came, Satya Prem Ki Katha, if you guys have heard about it. Have you guys heard about it? Usme she talks about the concept of date rape. And she's like, if I have a boyfriend and if I allow him certain things, he thinks that he can do anything, right? He has the right to do anything with me, but that is not true. And when once I said no, why does he continue doing things that I don't want him to do, right? And no one understands this. No one will understand this. Even today, अगर हम ये story पढ़े या पढ़ाए लोगों को, no one will understand. They'll all say it was his right, right? He was her husband. So it is a very normal everyday narrative, right? And in the story, she does not, call him her husband or something. She refers to him as the man constantly because she does not know him. She thinks of him as a stranger. They have an arranged marriage, right? And they can only become truly husband and wife once the marriage is consummated, right? And the only reason to get married is to produce children. So she decides to, consider this act as the consummation of her marriage and the reason to conceive children. That's it. She does not expect that she'll be happy or she'll love him or they'll ever have a bond, right? She gives up on that because he does not listen to her. And she says this in the story. He should have given me some time. He should have heard me. He should have helped me. But उसने ऐसा कुछ नहीं करा. And I have a lot of guilt, shame, and fear, but what will I tell to the society? What will I tell others when I go back? They won't understand what I'm trying to say, right? And she says that this was kind of an attack, and I'm glad that this is over. And and towards the end, she can only hear him snoring loudly. She cannot hear the waves. She cannot hear what is happening around her anymore because she is now forced into this marriage where she has no agency. समझ में आ गई? Make sense? Any doubts? Any doubts? Yes or no तो बोल दो यार फिर आगे चलेंगे. मैंने लास्ट लाइन क्या बोली? In this story ना they go to a place जहाँ पे sea है पास में, right? Honeymoon के लिए. They go there and she can throughout hear the sea waves. She can hear the air around her, right? She enjoys that. But towards the end जब उसने के husband ने forcefully उसके साथ सब कुछ कर लिया and then he sleeps and he snores. She can no longer hear the sea, the waves, the air, the birds, nothing. All she can hear is him snoring. So in a way, this represents that earlier she could, think of bigger things. She could think of freedom. She could think of herself, what she wants. But now all she can hear is what her husband wants and what he did with her. Right? And she has to just listen to him, focus on him, because now she's been forced into this marriage in every possible way. She cannot escape this, right? Sea represented freedom and openness, right? But now, as the husband rules her in a way, he owns her in a way because that is how she acted. He acted, na, that I own your body, I can do anything I want. So she no longer has that agency. Okay. Now the last story that we'll talk about is Manjula Padmanabhan's Stain. अगर if you guys attended my offline classes, there's a Google Classroom that I have and उसमें मैंने सारे text share करे हुए हैं. So in case you guys want the text, you can join that Google Classroom, ठीक है? And you will find the core text there, all the core texts. ठीक है? Because Stains by Manjula Padmanabhan is not easily available online. ठीक है? हाँ. I'll share the Google Classroom code with you towards the end of the class. Okay, you can join it then. Now, Stains by Manjula Padmanabhan is about the menstrual stains that a girl has on her clothes and on the bed sheet. And there is this couple, Deepak, and he's in relationship with a black American woman, Sarah, and Deepak lives with his mother, Mrs. Kumar. They live in America, but his mother has a very, old and traditional Indian mindset where she feels that women should not talk about periods publicly. Women should not, wash and dry their menstrual clothes in the sun. Right, so starting May, Sarah has to dry her stained bed sheet stained with blood, the bed sheet stained with blood. In the basement, she had to wash it with cold water and then she had to hang it in the basement, right? And she cannot talk about this with Deepak as well because Deepak believes that these are women things and they should not be talked to about, publicly or with men, right? So इसमें we are seeing a lot of binaries basically. There are a lot of divides, foreign versus Indian, man versus woman, traditional versus modern, right? There's an Indian old woman, Deepak's mother, Mrs. Kumar, and the black modern girl, Sarah. Of course, old versus young, way traditional versus modern wala. And there is this concept of private individuals with a social history and reality. So foreign versus Indian divide ये है कि Sarah believes it is very normal to talk about periods, to talk about, what a woman is going through, and she also believes that a couple should get should get privacy, right? And they should get to decide what they want in their lives. But uh, Deepak's mother, Mrs. Kumar, is always intervening in their life, right? She's asking Sarah to do this, to do that, to eat like in a certain way, and to behave in a certain way, to dress in a certain way. And Sarah does not like that. And Sarah believes that Deepak and Sarah should have some privacy from her, mother. And also, Mrs. Kumar does not directly speaks to Sarah, but she goes and talks to Deepak about her, and Sarah does not like this. And Sarah does not like the fact also that Mrs. Kumar is so rigid. She does not want to listen. She does not want to change, right? And she tries to turn everything according to herself. And Deepak supports his mother because Deepak believes that yes, they are private individuals. Yes, they have some individualistic needs and desires, but also they are part of a social reality and they have a social history that defines their cultures and values. For example, he says, I'm an Indian, even though I'm living here, but my values are Indian. My mother believes in a lot of Indian things. And similarly, you are a black American woman and you have different values, different ideas, right? Different customs and traditions. And he says he this difference will always be there and we have to accept this, right? And Sarah does not feel heard. She does not feel seen with her own boyfriend. And she says ki when we used to live away from your mother, you were very different. And now since we live with her, you are so different, right? You see me as something foreigner, something foreign, and you see me as an alien who's so different from you. And earlier we used to seem, so much alike, and now you're maintaining this distance between us, which is not at all true. right? And she could also see how there is a gender difference coming in, because the way Deepak thinks and the way Sarah thinks about periods, about society, about family are very different, right? And also sometimes women become, complicit subjects of patriarchy. इसका मतलब क्या है? Sometimes women themselves support the patriarchal beliefs and practices, and in doing so they undermine their role as women. ठीक है? मतलब जैसे patriarchal notion है ये कि women should not go out in their periods, women should not hang their menstrual clothes publicly, right? They should not talk about menstruation publicly, while menstruation is a very natural and biological process which actually produces children, but it is frowned upon. And women like Mrs. Kumar, they continue this thinking of patriarchy by agreeing that women should hide what periods are, they should hide about all this, and they should follow what the society says. समझ में आया ये वाला point? समझ में आया तुम लोगों को what I'm trying to say? That women themselves sometimes become perpetrators of other women when they support patriarchy. ठीक है? Now, traditional versus modern. Of course, Sarah is a modern girl, right? She's from America, and she considers many things normal, which are not normal according to Deepak's mother. And there are a lot of clashes. अगर आप लोग story पढ़ोगे ना, so you will find so many clashes in small things that they talk about, right? For example, Deepak's mother want Sarah to eat dalia, to eat something light, right? And she wants Sarah to rest, not to roam around. What are menstrual taboos? Menstrual taboos तो यही है ना जिसके बारे में बात चल रही है. That a woman should not talk about it. A woman should not go out. A woman should rest. She should eat light. All these things are somewhere right as well. But the fact that Mrs. Kumar is forcing Sarah to do something which she does not want to do is actually trying to control Sarah in a way, right? No, Sarah says, I'm allowed to do what I want, I'm allowed to sit wherever I want, but your mother is excluding me and she is trying to maintain a distance from me just because I'm on my periods. And Deepak says that you are a feminist, right? And you don't understand my mother and you're considering her as the enemy, as the oppressor, but she's just caring for you, right? And so this is how sometimes we justify others' behavior, that when someone is rude to us or when someone shouts to us and they say ki we care about you, that's why we are doing this. But caring about someone you know does not justify you trying to control them. This is what Sarah says, that your mother is trying to control me, right? She does not want to discuss anything. She just gives us the final decision of her own, right? And then there is this divide about the Western and Indian thinking. Ki that is how Indians think, and this is how Western thinks. But Sarah says ki you used to think like this only, Deepak, but now since your mother is around, you're acting in a very strange way, right? And then he comments on the way she looks or the way her personality is because she's from the West and because she is a black woman, right? And he says ki if you live in America, if you don't live in Africa, but you still have African lineage and you should believe in that, and you cannot say what the white man, as in what the Americans believe and say, right? But then Sarah says ki I'm American, I live in America, I'm an American citizen, America is a part of me, so how can you expect me to separate that from me, right? You cannot do that. मैं यहाँ बड़ी हुई हूँ, मेरी यहाँ की भी values है. I'm a mix of both the values, right? And then there is this divide between the individual and the social. And he says that there is, yes, you are an individual, I'm an individual, but we live in a society, and the society has certain perceptions about them, right? And you see me as someone who's not Deepak says this, ki Sara, you're not someone who is believing in my values and who's considering me as a foreigner or as an Indian, right? But I will not lose my traditional values because of this, right? And we we have some rules and regulations that have been in place for so long, and a mother is just trying to continue them, right? And these things should not be discussed publicly. And I just believe in them, right? And then Sarah finally when she tries to talk about it and all that, she says ki this is not something I want, right? And she just packs her bag and she just gets up and leaves. She leaves Deepak's house, right? Because she says that you do not understand what I'm trying to say, right? And you do not know what a woman needs, what a woman wants. And she says that towards the end of the story, she says that my, tampons or my menstrual pads and these represent the journey that women have made, because earlier they did not even have this, but you'll never understand this, that women have grown so much, right? And Deepak ends up thinking that she is trying to compare, you know Indian civilization, yet so many years of civilization, with the development of feminine hygienic products. And he gets offended by this, and Sarah just leaves because Deepak is not ready to understand what Sarah is trying to tell her. She feels helpless, right? And that's why she gets up and leaves. So we can see all these things happening. ये सारे divides दिख रहे हैं. समझ में आया? कुछ समझाऊं? Are you guys clear with this? Did this make sense? These are the things that you can talk about when you're talking about this particular story. Right? तो इस story से related ये सारे questions आ सकते हैं. And when you're talking about stains, this story particularly, so you can have a lot of contrasting views in the story itself. No, they were not married. They were just dating, and they went over to visit his mom, and they were living with her for a few days. They were not married. They were planning to get married, and that's why they went to Deepak's mother. But she gets up and leaves. Deep was the guy she was in a relationship with. Uska full name is Deepak. Okay? And in Deshpande's story, the question can be that can be asked are, uh, what is the significance of the title, right? Let's look at some questions as well. See, discuss how Deshpande's intrusion reflects the plight of Indian women who are caught up in the accepted logic of matrimony. As I told you, इसमें यही हो रहा है कि she's caught up in the marriage, right? She's not comfortable. She feels frustrated. She feels humiliated. She feels very violated, but she cannot say anything because, of course, the society will not accept whatever she says, and she cannot hamper her society, right? Being an ideal wife is more important than being a good individual or a free individual. तो इसमें ये आएगा, ठीक है? रमानी वाली story. The free radio, the strength of the story lies in its political message of a deadlock overtaking the country. इसका मतलब ये है कि the country can no longer be free, right? Mrs. Kumar was Deepak's mother. Explore the theme of marital rape in the intrusion. Write a critical note on the title of the story, the free radio. Discuss these questions, right? ये तो आपकी stories के हैं. Where does the couple go? Who is the narrator of the free radio? We've talked about all this, right? Let's look at some more questions. Describe the sense of physical violation in this Pandey's intrusion. Ye we are talked about right now. That the woman feels violated. She feels that he intruded her privacy. He did not, her husband did not consider her right to her own body, right? He did not take her consent at all. Okay? What else is there? Hmm. Discuss how Deshpande uses the technique of split consciousness to voice the innermost feelings of the female protagonist. Split consciousness क्या होती है? When you the character is in same places is in two places at the same time. For example, जो intrusion में protagonist है, she is in the present, right? She is with her husband physically, but mentally she's thinking about other things. She's thinking about her home, she's thinking about her mother, she's thinking about the sea, she's thinking about the breeze, right? And she's thinking about how if she'll say something, her husband might get offended. And she's also thinking about how her mother-in-law would have reacted to certain things. So her split consciousness tells her about what she's feeling, what is going through her right mind when she is with her husband on a honeymoon. तो ये भी कॉन्ट्रास्ट है कि वो जो कर रही है और वो जो उसके साथ हो रहा है एंड वर्सेस जो उसके माइंड में चल राइट what in your opinion is Rashdi's comments on the socio-political situation of India in free radio? As I talked about, he's talking about the emergency, the sterilization, how the government is making shallow promises, right? See, write a critical note on the title of the story, The Intrusion. ठीक है? Why did Ramani agree for vasectomy? We've talked about all these things. In the story Intrusion, marriage stands deconstructed for the limitations it puts on the feelings of a woman. We've talked about all this, right? अभी हमने यही सब बात करी है. In Intrusion, the author lets the reader know about a woman's feelings when she finds herself caught in the accepted logic of matrimony. See, the accepted logic of matrimony वही है जो patriarchy enforces on women, right? It is just accepted as something normal, but it is not. It is not because it has been enforced by men, not by women, right? Else, what else? एक और पेपर है बस, then we'll call it off. We'll done for the day. I think we're done with all the papers, right? हाँ तो your question was cultural conflict. That is what I'm talking about ना. Stains में सारी cultural conflict ही तो है. There's the Indian versus Western divide. There is the traditional versus modern divide, right? And then there's the private individual versus the social reality and the history of the people, right? And yes, it is a, cosmopolitan world where everyone is living with everyone, but everyone has their own values and traditions which they follow, which they cannot, reject or cannot avoid. They have to follow those traditions. अब यहाँ पे फिर दो टाइप के लोग होते हैं. एक तो मिसेस कुमार जैसे जो बिल्कुल भी चेंज एक्सेप्ट ना करे, जो बहुत रिजिड हो, जो अपने ट्रेडिशंस को सब कुछ माने. एंड ऑन द अदर हैंड पीपल लाइक सैरा who want to accommodate things, who want to find a midway. But अगर सामने वाला accommodating नहीं है, if they are not trying to adjust, then they cannot, you know, help it. Nothing can change because of that. Right? समझ में आ गया? If anyone of you wants to join the Google Classroom, the code is T5WKHGE. I'll repeat it. D for donkey, 5, W, K, H, G, E. Got it? Done? Any doubts? Anything? No, all are in small. Small. Okay, I'll write. It's D, 5, W, K, H, G. I've shared the classroom code. If you have any doubts, you can just, write your doubts there. You'll find materials there. Yes, yes. ये Google Classroom पे मिलेगा आपको. Yes. ठीक है? Any doubts or should we leave? Are we done? Okay, then. I hope you guys could understand things. And thank you for joining in. See you.